Sundays in the South were slow, deliberate things. The air hung heavy with the smell of fried chicken and cornbread, and the sound of a preacher's voice drifted from church doors left open to let in a breeze. Families filled the pews, the men in starched shirts and scuffed boots, the women in dresses that rustled when they moved. Children squirmed, the back of their knees sticking to the wooden benches, while mothers whispered sharp warnings to stay still. The sermon always felt too long when you were young. The preacher's voice rose and fell, calling for repentance and righteousness. You didn't understand all the words, but you felt their weight. They mixed with the scent of hymnals, old wood, and the faint tang of sweat. There was a rhythm to it all, a cadence that was familiar as the red dirt roads leading back home. After church, the world softened. Dinner tables stretched with bowls of greens, mashed potatoes, and ham that was glazed just right. Sweet tea pooled in mason jars, sweating under the sun. The talk was easy, about nothing and everything, and the sound of cicadas carried through the air. Children raced barefoot in the yard, dodging the swings of an old tied tire to an oak tree, while the old folks stayed on the porches, shaded by the eaves, their stories spilling into the afternoons. Evenings were quieter. The sun would dip low, painting the fields in gold, and the church bells would chime in the distance. Families gathered again, sometimes for more food, sometimes for prayer. The men might sit in worn chairs under the stars, lighting pipes and leaning on old tales. The South held its breath on Sundays. It was a day to rest, to remember, to feel the weight of what mattered most. And as the crickets began their evening song, you knew you were part of something rooted deep, something you wouldn't fully understand until you were older and far away, longing for the way the world used to slow down. The sun dipped lower, bleeding orange and red into the horizon. It set behind the fields that stretched further than the eye could see, where cotton bolls glowed faintly in the fading light. Sundays were never rushed. There was no urgency to beat the darkness, no schedules to keep. The day unraveled like an old story told again, not for novelty, but for comfort. The sound of an acoustic guitar drifted from a porch just down the road. A man played the old songs, the ones everybody knew but nobody wanted to forget. His voice was rough, softened by time and too many cigarettes, but it carried a truth the polished singers never could. The children stopped chasing fireflies to listen, and the grown-ups nodded along, their faces painted with memories. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Someone laughed, and the sound carried over the fields. There was something sacred about these moments, though nobody would call it that. You only knew they were sacred later, when the days got shorter and the world grew louder. On Sundays, you felt the weight of it all that had come back before. The land carried its stories in the furrow of the plowed fields and the cracked boards of the old barns. The people carried theirs in the lines on their faces and the way they spoke each other's names like prayers. When the stars came out, they came out bright and clean like diamonds scattered over a black velvet sky. The air cooled and the sounds of the night grew. Crickets, bullfrogs, the low hum of a far-off tractor someone had forgot to shut down. You sat on the steps of the porch, your knees pulled to your chest, and you looked out at the world. It was still and vast, and it wrapped you in its arm like a mother does a tired child. The South was good at holding on to things. It held on to its stories, its scars, its love. And Sundays were the best of it. They lingered, quiet and strong, like the smell of honeysuckle after a rain. You didn't notice them then, not really, but later, when you were far away from home, you would close your eyes and feel it all again. The sun, the breeze, the music, the laughter. And you would know that you had lived something that mattered.